Hey, welcome back to Excel for Accountants. This is Marco, and we're picking up with one of my new series that I'm starting out for the channel called Excel Build It From Scratch. So, in my Excel Build It From Scratch series, one of the things I do a lot in my field for my job is that I often have to build functional worksheets that are used for multiple purposes. And so, in my Build It From Scratch, you would kind of see me go through the entire process of building a brand new worksheet that is to be used either on a monthly or quarterly or annual basis for tackling either a specific task or a specific set of tasks. So in this example, or in this Building from Scratch series, we're going to be focusing on a payroll worksheet for the fictional company I'm going to call Kingston. I'm Jamaican, so Project Kingston is the name. Kingston is the name of the fictitious company that we'll be using for this example. And in essence, it's going to be a nonprofit with many different projects, roughly about 200 employees. And so in essence, I'm going to build this entire worksheet from scratch. The worksheet will deal with salary allocation. It will deal with fringe pool allocation as well as overhead pool allocation. So obviously this varies from company to company in terms of how they do their internal allocation. But in essence, for consistency, we're going to map out the parameters of this company before we even get started with anything. So the first tab we're going to have here will be the company info. So I'll just put this as tab A. So company info. All right. So we kind of go through the whole process. So this is more of a free-forming playlist, and not too much editing, but for the most part, you kind of get my thought process. So company info on here, Kingston company name. It's a nonprofit. So we're gonna have about 50 projects. Okay, about 200 employees. Okay, so that kind of gives us a good idea. Fringe and overhead will be allocated based on the salary percentage, so that's what we're going to use for the distribution method or the percentage method. So fringe and overhead allocated based on salary. To calculate a percentage. All right, so kind of get that started. So this is the basic info. So there we go. Okay, so first we're going to do that. Now that we know how things are structured from the beginning, this kind of helps us maps things out beginning. So whenever we're starting, and the premise of this document is that you're going to be doing your monthly allocation. So you will get your payroll reports from either Paychex, Bamboo, or whichever payroll company you're using to get information. And so, but before we can do any of that, we do need to have an employee listed. So we're going to go through right here and create the employee listing, because in essence, this is going to be the key indicator right here in terms of how we're going to be actually structuring everything. So employee list right here. So employee name right here. And so we have to have 200 employees. So I may speed this process up. Instead of having you watch me create 200 employees, you might skip ahead to when I already have 200 employees created. So yeah. But before we do that, we're gonna map out what else we need. Salary, their monthly salary. Well, we're gonna have their annual salary and annual hours. For the purposes of this, all staff members are salary. So let's put that in here. So salary employees for all. No hourly. So just to make it a little bit easier, hourly could always be tricky because again it varies how many hours to work, overtime, all that craziness. But for just keeping it simple across the board, we're gonna make everybody salary and no hourly employee. Okay. And then on top of that, we are gonna actually have employee numbers, because sometimes on payroll report you sometimes need the employee numbers, and that makes it easier to kind of link things correctly. Okay, expected monthly salary, and then expected hourly. Now obviously hourly varies by month depending on how many days in the month, etc. So but we're gonna probably just put average hourly. Okay. Alright, so we are going to pick up where we left off. So in essence, we are going to be creating 200 employees, and for now, I'm just going to kind of put a lot of the names the same. I'm going to change this later on once we are done, but in order to speed things up, I'm just going to kind of copy and paste all over again. Obviously, we're going to have to change the name to make sure there's no duplicates, as well as make sure that employees' IDs are unique, but for the most part, kind of have to speed this along. This part, I consider this a bit of the boring part, so we don't necessarily have to include this in the actual video itself, but I kind of want to speed it along and kind of get things moving. So, alright, we have 200 sample names to play with, and we'll, modify it as we see fit. But in essence, employee ID number right here. So, starting now, we have to make sure that we populate the list. Now, most payroll reports, they go based on last name first and first name. So in essence, usually the format for that, and this is where I kind of wanted to pick back up recording things, is kind of see how I format and structure things for later on. So I want to make sure that my employee list matches the report name and structure from whichever report you're using. So for me, it's usually either Paychex or Bamboo, so Paychex, ADP, or Trax. Those are the three I'm mostly using. So let's keep that in. Alright, so for the most part, most payroll reports, they definitely have last name first and then first name. And so we're going to have that be the primary structure for this column right here in column B, and you'll see why that's important later on. But for now, let's go ahead and put it in there. And so, last name first, then there's usually a comma, and so space, and then first name. Okay? Right here. And so we're gonna do, and so what I like to do, because I like to go all the way to the bottoms, I usually like to put like a little asterisk or just anything right here. And the reason why, you'll see in a second, is that whenever I'm copying all the way down, I like to go like that, and I like to have that stop right there. Obviously some people have their own methods of doing it, but this is the method I like to use the most. It's just simple, straightforward, nothing too fancy for the most part. And so I usually like to put a little dot, period at the end of all the empty columns, so that way when I need to copy all the way down, it stops right there. Okay, so we're just gonna keep it simple. So employee ID, we're just gonna put. We're gonna start this. So usually for my company and other places I've worked at, salary expenses usually starts at either 5,000 or 6,000. So it just kind of depends on your company, but for the most part, we're gonna keep this as starting at 6,000. One for the first employee. And then we're going to go from there. So it's 4 digits. So that way it's not too, you could autofill. Or you could just do this, I guess. Alright, there we go. Okay, so yep, so now we have 200 employees, names with 200 IDs. I do need to check real quick if there's any duplicates, because that would confuse the system, particularly when we start using XLOOKUP if it has the same information. So I like to put, I use conditional format a lot to check for just obvious errors, things like that. So I'm checking to see if there's any errors, and I'm going to filter this right now just to kind of see. And just kind of see, okay, so there's no filter by color, which means there's no duplicate names in this, which is good. That's what I want. I do not want any duplicates here, because that would confuse the formats later on. So this is the early part of setting things up. It might not necessarily be the most fanciest part of things, but a lot of times setting things up correctly from the beginning saves you so much headache later on when you start to actually use the worksheet, and it makes you have to worry about a lot less for the most part. For the most part, if you have a software that could do all the salary, fringe, and overhead allocation for you, that is preferable. However, that is not always the case. Sometimes that's tricky, because the software you may have might be an accounting software. It may not have that specific module to do it, or your company may not have the budget to buy an accounting software that does have that ability built in. So there's some software that I've seen that costs close to $100,000 in terms of paying for the software and the implementation of the software, things like that. And some of those software, they do have payroll allocation built in, but you technically have to have that software to actually be able to use it. So it's really dependent on if you have the software or not. So if you don't have that software, then your best case is using Excel. So it's one of those things where if you have the software to do it, then take advantage of it, sure. But in most case scenario, if you do not have that software, your next best thing or your next best friend is Excel or something similar. So yeah, All right, so we have this set up, annual salary. So for the most part, we're just going to do random number, random between. And so for this, we're going to have the bottom be 50K, and the top, like the highest possible paid salary is going to be, I'm going to top it at 150 just to be conservative. Okay, I mean, because at the end of the day, yeah, we know the number is always going to change, and you know that's fine. I don't mind a number changing starting out, but now that I have the salaries there, I am going to copy and paste value because I don't want it to change every single time I run this report. I just did this just to populate it fast and get it there. So I'm going to copy and paste, get rid of this, and yeah, bingo. So this is the salary now after using the random between to kind of get sample numbers and just populate really fast. So this is, I only do this of course because again I'm just building it from scratch, so I want to populate it with data, and sometimes the random formula is really good for just populating it, but then it makes it difficult to track stuff, particularly if you want to troubleshoot for like if somebody got paid the wrong amount, things like that. And so you kind of want to make sure that it's a static number once you have the each cells filled out. So use the random to get the numbers, but then copy paste value just to make sure that it doesn't always change, so that way later on when you start doing checks, you don't have to worry about, wait, wasn't this guy getting paid 80K but now he's getting paid 90K? Like that's not technically the reality of when you're doing salary, fringe, and overhead allocation. So that's just a little trick just to kind of get it populated. So everybody's working 40 hours, so for this we're just going to do 40 hours times 52 weeks. So pretty standard, full-time, all salary, etc. So I like to put this in the middle. Here we go. And again, I like to format things, as I go through it, just to kind of make sure it's easily viewable. Because even though this is a worksheet that is built for accountants, other non-accountants may need to look at this information. So you at least want to make sure that it's easy to read, easier to kind of go through, from left to right, like you're reading a book or a chapter. So you'll notice that I put a lot of the data-driven information up front. These index tabs, as I call them, will be useful later on when we start doing a lot of the crazy calculation for things. Okay, so expected monthly salary. So in essence, this is what we expect their average salary to be. So for the purposes of this calculation, we are going to say that nobody's going to get any bonus or anything like that for right now, starting out. We'll work that in later on, but for now, this is where we expect on average their salary to be per month. So, if he's getting paid $89K a year, on average we expect that he's going to get about $7,493 in salary per month, not factoring any bonuses or any potential merit increase, things like that. So average monthly hour. Now this one of course will vary because each month is different, but we'll just say this divided by 12. This is the average. And notice that I said average monthly hour, which is different from expected monthly salary. So I expect his salary based on his total salary per year to be this amount. The hours may vary, but that's the thing about salary employees, that regardless of how much their hours vary per month, their salary is usually about the same. At least that's what most companies put in their budget, that we're going to pay this person the same salary wise regardless of the actual hours per month. That may vary from company to company, so that's a company policy. I've seen companies that they've kind of shortened it per month that has less hours, and then increased it for months that had more hours. But most companies don't really do that though. So for this example, we say average. Now we know for a fact that it's definitely not going to average out to 173 hours per month. And again, we know that this is going to vary. So, but this is just like a starting ground to kind of make sure, people are within that range. Usually to be over or under, depending on the month. Okay. So this is the first tab, and again, the company info is right here. So sample of this worksheet will be available once it's fully done for all my Patreon subscribers, because this is definitely going to be a very massive worksheet once I'm done. It's a big project. So, but the thing is, I like building big projects like this, and for the most part, these types of projects I usually get done pretty fast within my job, because I would literally just be working on this for like 20 plus hours straight. However, with this being a YouTube series, editing things, making changes, things like that, this type of video will be more freeform, so it will take a little bit longer than normal, but you'll kind of get to see my thought process as I map things out and go through it at a much slower pace than I would in my actual job. And the purpose, of course, is to kind of show you all my tricks, all the little things I do. You might pick up on a few little tricks here and there, but for the most part, this is kind of help you see how advanced Excel users in accounting and finance field use to create worksheets that are usable on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. One thing I'm going to make a change for right here is I'm going to delete this rule right here, and the reason why is because at the end of the day I want my rule to be in this column, because this is my prime column right here for when I'm pulling information. This is the index. It's going to be between these two columns right here. So these two are the most important columns in terms of linking things to formulas such as XLOOKUP, VLOOKUP, anything else that has any type of lookup. And then of course we'll be comparing information right here and what we expect it to be versus what the actual monthly report is giving us for the salary for that month. Okay, so I'm going to highlight these two columns, not the actual. I'm going to highlight, the column header itself, so that way I just know. And this is more of a preference thing. I just like to highlight important columns so I kind of, automatically know to go where to look at when I'm looking at something for a specific tab. Okay, so we're gonna just end it right here. Just the first video is gonna be short. Well, the first video is gonna be a little basic in terms of just setting things up. Setting up the tabs for the first couple of videos, and then later on you'll kind of see how things play out later on. Okay, so thank you guys for watching the first one. Again, very basic. You'll see a bit more stuff in the next video when we start actually dealing with the staff in terms of their allocation percentage, the campaigns, things like projects that they'll be using. So as you can see in the company info, we have 200 employees, 50 projects. So let's go ahead and move this over so that it kind of see how we're mapping things out. So yes, employees, projects, etc. Okay, so all right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.